This is going to be a talk about language, media, and experience. And I want to start with a couple of chicken and egg questions. And the first one is, which comes first, language or experience? See, you couldn't talk about the world, you couldn't think about the world if you didn't have some categories, some language, some representation, right? On the other hand, those categories and representations of the world are given meaning by the world, right? They have to apply to the world. So, is the best way to learn language to first learn some language and then go have some experiences and apply it? Or is the best way to first have some experiences and then learn some language, right? What's the relationship between the two? Now, of course, if you accept this at all, the one thing we do not want to do is teach language with no experience or have experience with no language, right? We probably have to have both. And I want to argue that eventually that games and digital media illuminate this question in a very good way. Now, another way this has been put is it's the contrast between language as system, that is, as a grammar that gives you words with sort of meanings you could look up in dictionaries, right? And language as situation or situated, that is language that actually applies. This is actually a fairly trivial point, but it has big implications and we tend to ignore them constantly in education. So to give you an example, we all know at the system level what copy means, right? You know, but on the other hand, the actual situational meaning of copy would, like any word, changes in the actual context you're in, right? So the coffee spilled, go get a mop. The coffee spilled, go get a broom. The coffee spilled, stack it again. You can feel your head changing images, changing the experiences to give the specific meaning, what I call the situating meaning, the situational meaning to coffee, right? Now, it's pretty clear that if all you had was the knowledge of English grammar and the lexical definitions of the words, but you couldn't do this sort of situating meaning, you would have worthless knowledge, right? Now, the other thing is we also can situate meanings that are brand new. You can make up new meanings on the spot. So you've probably never heard a sentence like big coffee is as bad as big oil, but you have absolutely no trouble knowing what big coffee means there. How did you do that? You just made up a meaning for something you've never heard using the system information that we have the word coffee, but that didn't help you know what this means. Well, obviously you did it because you have heard all these conversations about big oil and corporations and greed and stuff. You have immersed yourself in a bunch of experiences just by being around, and you in microseconds called up the right experience to give the right meaning for the first time in history to this word. And you do that all the time, right? So this is an argument that situating meaning is not like the old linguistic metaphor was we pull it out of a dictionary. It's just sitting in a lexicon in the head and you pull it out. You're actually making it up. You are actively making the meanings, not just pulling them out of something. All right, now to give you an example that's a little better than coffee, here is a remark made by the mayor of Bogota this guy observes that high-quality public pedestrian space in general, and parks in particular, are evidence of the democracy, of true democracy at work. Now, see, what is the system meaning of democracy? What is its kind of general meaning, its definition meaning? Well, voting, representation, voting for representatives, voting in government, right? Now, that system meaning doesn't help you much here, does it? How could it be that a true democracy can be measured by public space? Well, I thought true democracies were by voting, right? Well, you're making up meanings for that right now. You have to, and the dictionary definition of democracy is not helping you much. But I would venture to say here it's a little bit different than the big oil example, because my bet is you've had very different experiences of democracies, of countries, of controversies over democracy. You may be in different, well, not at Columbia, but you might have been in different parties had I been elsewhere. And you're then bringing that experience to try to figure out what this means, right? And that is, see, so when education is responsible for teaching the relationship between a system and the experiences that you have to give it situational meaning. So I think you can tell right away, before we get to anything substantive, that I'm going to be pushing the role of experience as almost an ethically charged notion for education, because I think what we do is we deny experience to people. We often give them language with no experience, and tests with no experience. All right, now there's another chicken and egg question, and that is, which comes first, learning or experience? Now, the reason this is a chicken egg question now is lots of work over the last 25 years in cognitive science, neuroscience, distributed intelligence, all sorts of different areas, has argued that humans learn from experience, right? That what you do is you have experiences, you store all of them in your head. Your long-term memory is virtually endless. You then use your past experiences to get ready for future action. When you have to solve a problem or do something, this is what all humans, the ones who don't do this by evolution are gone. You get ready for that action by thinking, well, based on past experience, what might happen? You actually can even role play in your mind based on having gone to a lot of weddings. What might happen if I insult the minister? What might, and I actually think about it, it's almost like a video game in your head. You role play enough based on your past experience to get good ideas about how to act so you don't screw up all the time. That's why, so experience is the basis of learning. So again, which comes first though? It's saying you really can't learn anything new unless you have old experiences to think about what to do. But what happens if you have no experiences? Then how would you learn? Right? See, so which comes first? Well, it's kind of clear here. Experience comes first. But how could you learn anything in experience when you have no previous experience to make any hypotheses, to make any guesses, without killing yourself? I mean, one thing is just go have an experience and find out that falling down a mine shaft doesn't work and you're dead. That was your one experience. So this is an interesting and important chicken and egg question. Now, over the years, last few years, I've become very interested in the connections between learning and language. And linguists, since they're responsible for linguistics and language, are not really interested in learning. I mean, they might be interested in language learning, but not other learning. And lots of linguists aren't at least interested in language learning. And learning people are not interested in language because they're different disciplines. And so it is an open, you might say, well, what exactly does learning have to do with language? Right? Why should because I'm going to prate on about learning now, and you're going to think, well, I'm not talking about language anymore. Well, here's the answer of what learning has to do with language and what language has to do with learning. And that is this guy. Do we know who he is? He's not Henry Jenkins. It's Paulo Freire. Now, Paulo Freire, see you youngins. God. Paulo Freire famously argued that reading the word and reading the world are equivalent processes. Right? Now, he probably meant this as a political statement. But what I'm going to tell you is this now is an empirical statement. It is the truth that, see, any of you in literacy in here know that human comprehension is the same faculties that comprehend language, comprehend both written language and oral language, and are the same faculties that comprehend what's meaningful in the world. As we do not have a separate comprehension faculty for oral language, one for written language, one for the world. We use the same one, right? And that's just a fact about the human brain. And so what I'm going to be arguing here is that you can't read words if you have not experienced what they're about in the world. And you really cannot learn anything from the world relevant to words unless you have also learned something about the words. These are equivalent processes. And so we want to talk about how do you learn what a word means? But that also means how do you learn from experience? Right? These two questions are very similar. All right, now I'm going to go back to say to you that, so now we're going to take up this idea that people learn from experience, and then what do they use that experience for? To give situated meanings to language, and to get ready for new problem-solving experiences. This is what humans do. Now, the theory, going theory is lots of research though, that experience in and of itself is actually not that good for learning because you could die, right? It's like, as I mentioned earlier, Mark Twain's famous remark that his uncle fell down a chimney and fell into the fire and died, so much for learning through experience. The fact of the matter is, humans are really built biologically and neurologically to learn from experience only of certain types. That you, in a sense, the experience that they learn best from are not any old experiences. They are experiences that have these features. That's why I'm calling them experience GL, meaning good for learning. So the first is, you have to have a lucid goal. You have to be in an experience. There has to be an action you need to take, and you have to have a goal in that experience, and you have to care about the outcome of the action. You also need somebody to help you manage your attention, because in experience, one of the things is too rich. There's too much to pay attention to. And if you're a newcomer, you don't know what to pay attention to, what to foreground, what to background, what's relevant and what's not. So you need your attention managed, or you waste an immense amount of time. And this is to say, the experience needs to be well designed. That is where somebody's made clear the goal, somebody has helped you manage your attention, somebody has set it up so you care. And that's what I call a well-designed experience. And that's, by the way, what teachers do. Although teachers now mean parents, mentors, machines, teachers in schools, and social groups. They do this for you, right? If you're going to become, I like birds, if you want to become what they call a birder, in the discourse of birding where people recognize you're a real birder, then it'll do you no good just to walk out and look for birds. You have to be put in experiences where you know what to pay attention to, how to look at the bird, how to look for the bird, and it has to matter to you. Right? The point about mattering, there has to be an action. Humans don't learn well if they don't have an action to take an experience, because they don't get any feedback from the world. But they also don't learn well if they don't care. And this is actually, when you care, when you put something's at stake, when you take an emotional charge on it, you process it quite differently. You process it much more deeply, so that it gets integrated, the information you're learning gets integrated with your background knowledge and with your former experience in a much deeper, much more useful way, right? That's why people learning, let's say, Spanish or French in a classroom, where they often don't care much, process the learning very superficially, right? There's also research from years ago that shows that you can give humans a kind of logical problem and put it in abstract terms, and 75% of them fail it. We're just terrible at it. But if you translate it into more concrete terms where something is at stake, like catching cheaters, there's like a set of rules. How does this rule work? When you put it in terms where humans think something's at stake, and for evolutionary rules, humans are particularly good at catching cheaters. If you want to know why, I'll ask. You can ask. Then 75% of them get the very same problem correct. See, what this says is if you want people to fail in school, give them stuff to do they don't care about. And in abstract terms that make them care even less. If you want them to look really smart, give them stuff they care about in terms that make them care about it, right? All right, so I'm saying that as we make this now demand that language teachers or content teachers must give people experiences that situate meaning and that make them intelligent for the future. I don't mean progressive stuff, just turn people loose. And this, by the way, shows that despite all this talk about we don't need teachers, every teaching is an ubiquitous act today, in the sense that more and more, and we'll see this, people are doing this for each other, through social groups, through schools, and other stuff. All right, there's Paolo again. Now, I want to, I've given you a dilemma, and it's this fundamental dilemma. I'm saying, look, there's two chicken and egg questions. Does language come before experience, or experience come before language? And does learning come first, or does experience come first? How do we manage this relationship? How do we see language and experience as not binaries, not opposites, not separate moments, but how do you actually solve this very real problem? which we don't solve well in school, right? Because we don't have much experience in school. We usually give a lot of language, but we don't give a lot of experience. And we don't always even manage, if we do give experience, we don't do well-designed experiences, right? So I'm going to give you an example of what I call a learning system that solves the problems I've just talked about, right? Because I think the concrete examples are a much easier way to think of things. There's a danger with concrete examples, and you're all going to go out of here and say, Jim said I should make card games. This is an example. It can be done in many different ways. I am not pushing Yu-Gi-Oh at you. I am not pushing card games at you. I am pushing that the problems we've just dealt with are solvable only in systems, not in one-off deals. And I'm going to show you what a system looks like, and I got to pick one. All right, now, how many of you know what Yu-Gi-Oh is? It's a card game, right? Good, a lot of people know. Yeah, there are 10,000 cards. Kids as young as 6 or 7 play it, adults play it. And you have to pick out of all the cards you have, you may have several hundred, you pick 40 cards to make a deck. And you have to, in the deck, kind of anticipate what sort of deck you're holding. And I'm just alternately freezing and hot. You have to kind of anticipate the sort of deck your other guy will pick, because each card has different powers, different weaknesses, so it's pretty strategic. Now the game is very complicated. I tried to learn to play it. My then 10-year-old was teaching me, but he beat me so fast, and then would say, "Dad, you're doing great. Do you want to play again?" That I never learned anything, right? But at any rate. And the other thing about Yu-Gi-Oh is you can't play if you can't read. And I'm going to show you in a minute. The language on the cards is very complicated, certainly at a very high reading level. And there's 10,000 cards, and the language on the card tells you what the card does. So obviously you can't do it if you don't know that language. And it's very small. That keeps adults away. Pretty small. All right, so let's get to it. This is just an example. So here's what you face in Yu-Gi-Oh. This is one card. I took it off a 7-year-old. I want you to notice, first of all, we have all this literature on, gee, school is tough. It's about 4th grade. It's academic language. It's complicated language. That damn high school chemistry book is a pain in the butt. This language is as academic and as arcanely technical as anything a kid sees in school, certainly at the age of 7. So it's the classificatory system. So all the stuff in the top is a classificatory system for the 10,000 cards. And then when this card is summoned, activate one of these effects. Target one equipped card, equipped to a monster on the field, destroy that card. Target one equipped card, equipped to a monster on the field, equip that target to this card. You want more of this? See, my point is, you have no idea what that means. And the moment that it's even worse because you say, at the system level, at the dictionary level, I know what every word means. I know, but I haven't got any idea what that means, and I don't want any more of it. So this is exactly how kids feel when you give them texts at school without the game related to the text, without the activities, but they can know every word, but they say, I have no idea what this means. They're as frustrated with it, and they want as little more of it as you do right now, but you're going to get more. So one thing that's intriguing to me, this is great for metacognition. The kids playing the game, because these rules are pretty arcane, will argue over the correct interpretation of the rule. Kind of like rabbinical scholars. And when they have a disagreement, they can go to look at copious rule books on the internet, right? And these are huge rule books, and they do, and then they argue over what that means. So here it says, in order to psychro summon a psychro monster, you need one tuner. Look for the tuner next to its type. The tuner monster and other face-up monsters you use for the synchro summon are called synchro material monsters. The sum of their levels is the level of synchro monster you can summon. I've seen 7-year-olds read this. And I want you to get the effect that the Yu-Gi-Oh company has the very same problem you have. I don't care what you're teaching. you're teaching language. If you're teaching math, you got to get people to understand the language of mathematics. If you're teaching Spanish, you got to get them to understand at least one register of Spanish, not just Spanish, something where you actually could use it. If you're teaching chemistry, they got to understand the language of chemistry, right? And some of the languages you're teaching, the language of chemistry, the language of physics, are just as inane as the language of Yu-Gi-Oh! If you don't know what to do in physics. Now, the other thing is to say, when you look at language, whether it's nuclear physics or this, and you feel that is arcane, boring, and totally unlucid, it isn't. For the people who know what it means, it's as simple as anything. Right? What you're missing is there is no such thing as hard language. All language that actually gets situated in experience is easy. The 7-year-olds who read this, see, when I took these cards from these 7-year-olds, and they were crying, and I just try to make them feel better. I said, but I'm really impressed when I hear you guys talking the language of the game to each other and arguing the rules. I mean, you realize how complex this language is. And they said, it isn't complex at all. What are you talking about? It's simple. Well, and I guarantee you go to a quantum mechanics person or a physicist or a chemist who's really impassioned by what they do. They don't find the language hard. In fact, what's the problem is they can't understand why you find it hard. Just like the Yu-Gi-Oh guy can't understand why are you so stupid you think this is hard. All right, now, so all my point is, the Yu-Gi-Oh company is facing a problem. I have got to solve the chicken and egg question. I have to get this language understood. I have to give experience. But how can they even know what to do with the experience if they don't know what the language says, right? Very same problem we face, with one difference. They will go broke if they don't solve it. Right? They will go broke. You know, it's just like Yu-Gi-Oh has 10,000 cards. Okay, see, I'm not a real big fan of capitalism, but this part I really like. Capitalists never underestimate people if they have money. And the fact is, imagine when they wanted to have 10,000 cards, that a psychologist said, well, you know, there's this magic number 7. Little kids can only kind of handle 7 to 8 distinctions. They can't, so you should have 7 cards. What's the capitalist going to say? If I can make money with 10,000, those damn little kids are going to learn 10,000 distinctions. And they do. There isn't actually no end to the number of distinctions they can learn. All right, so they have your problem. But let's see how they solve it. Let's see how they do it. How do they get to these dilemmas? And again, I'm not saying for you to go out and make everything a card game. All right, first thing you do is by the way, this is not in order. You don't do these things one after the other. You do them all together and you alternate, it's a system. So you give language situated meaning in this sense. The Yu-Gi-Oh card, every arcane bit you've heard there has a movement connected to it, or a place it's put, or something you say to the other player. Notice every piece of the language is attached to an image, to actions, and to a dialogue, right? It is attached to the world. It is not. So one of the things you certainly would not do is say, kids, we're going to learn Yu-Gi-Oh! Here's the Yu-Gi-Oh! Rule guide. Let me know when you finish reading it. That's what we do at school, right? Here's the textbook. Let me know when you read it. They'd be broke. What they're doing is they're going to say, look, we're going to set it up so that you're going to have some initial well-designed experiences where you won't fail. And what's going to be happening is you're going to see how each little technical word really fits into the world. That's what they're going to do. So you've got this pairing of language and action. The rule books and the websites exist to give you system information when you need it. You don't read them first. You only go to them after you know you need more information at that level, right? In fact, Yu-Gi-Oh! And other good learning systems use language just in time and on demand. That is, you either get a piece of this arcane language at a certain tutorial or a certain moment or within a game, just when you're going to apply it, just in time. You're going to see how it operates, just a little bit of it. Or you get a huge chunk in the rule book when you know you need it and want it. It's like the game Civilization. It comes with an encyclopedia, but you don't read it first. When you're really just on fire for Egypt, then you go read it, right? On demand. They use Convergent Media. This is Henry Jenkins' idea. The Yu-Gi-Oh! Company makes books, movies, and television shows, and these card games, as well as they have clubs in face-to-face, and they have computer versions of the game where you can even watch computer characters play it. And what that's doing is they're using every piece of media they can to teach, but in those medias, in the movies and the television shows and books, they give dramatic stories that are actually acting out the rules of the game. In other words, they're showing you nice monsters, but what they're really doing is they're playing out the rules in a dramatic story. It's directly showing you through different media how the language is matched to the action, but in a setting that's really making you care. It's, wow, that looked good, right? So you have convergent media. Low cost of failure. In other words, one of the things that all the people in the video game industry know is that if the cost of failure is high, people will not explore, they won't take risks, they won't try new styles, they won't learn new things and innovate. They get tunnel vision. So you have to lower the cost of failure because that exploratory period where you take risks without fear is so important to the early learning, right? Remember when I said well-designed experience is not sending the kid outdoors to get bitten by the black widow. You've got to put the kid in a sandbox that says, oh, I can take a risk and it won't kill me, right? That's the only way learning can start. The company ensures there are what I call affinity spaces. These are interest-driven groups on the internet of people who from all different ages, all different areas of expertise band together to talk about the game, review the game, write stories for the game, teach other about the game. And you go into one of those, they're all different styles, so you can choose your own style. And you can get, if you want a direct tutorial that's got lectures in it, there are 12-year-olds who've recorded all their Yu-Gi-Oh! Lectures, and you can get it that way. If you want a tutorial that shows you and actually annotates the game as you play it, you can get that. If you want a coach, you can get that. If you want to play and find somebody your level, you can get that. If you want advice, you can upload stuff and get it. But you know, it's just what's happening in this community is at every level there are people willing to teach you. And then as you go on, you have to be willing to teach them, right? If you know something they don't, you see. Some days you teach, some days you learn. So these affinity spaces are actually a distributed form of teaching, and they ain't fussy about ideology. They don't say lecturing is death. They say, you want to lecture in Yu-Gi-Oh? It's there. It's only death if a certain form of learning was forced on you, right? Now, the company and these affinity spaces, they help manage your attention and complexity in multiple ways. First of all, you can play against a computer and it will give you simplified versions of the game that strip away many of the variables so that you don't get cognitive overload. They will show you in annotation. You pay attention to this. Especially in social playing, you will learn where to do it. And so, the way that I finally learned enough of this is by playing in the computer games, who didn't try to beat me so quickly. But what I was, in the beginning, the computer games it's like a little fish tank. Here's going to be a little Yu-Gi-Oh game, and only a few of the variables are relevant, just the really important ones right now. So it's all really clear. Then when you get better, you can play against somebody real, but they put you at the same level as that guy, right? So if you're you language people, it's always I+1, always, right? So they also, all of this type of learning does not use time as a measurement of learning. See, in school, we say, okay, it's a 13-week algebra course, and in 13 weeks you get a grade. So we're using time is the measure. See, imagine this. Johnny takes a physics class. At the 13th week, he's got a C+. And then the 15th week, the course is over, but he does 2 more weeks on his own, and then he wins the Nobel Prize. Don't you feel silly? See, this game does not say, if you learn Yu-Gi-Oh! In 13 weeks, you're way smarter than her because she learned it in 17. Not when she's beating your butt, it doesn't say that, right? It says people start at different places, they have different trajectories, they have different goals. We measure achievement, not time, right? We measure mastery, not time. By the way, these are not age graded either, because if you're not going to measure on time, it doesn't matter how long you've been on Earth either. All right. Now, another thing that is extremely pervasive in the gaming culture is modding. Modding is the attitude that says, don't give me the game alone. Give me the tools by which you made the game so I can change it. I can even make my own games, right? This is called modding. So if you know Minecraft, today there are many modding communities where people have made their own versions of Minecraft and have got their own ideologies. This is part of the maker movement, right? It's part of the idea of young people saying, I want to be a producer, not just a consumer. Some of the mods are better than the original game, right? But what better way to learn a system other than to making it yourself or seeing the tools that were made of it, right? So modding is it's great for metacognition. The other thing is, Yu-Gi-Oh! Most games don't just give you a grade. There's a few of them do. I got the grade of Ninja Dog, Ninja Gaiden on one level. That's really not good learning. I mean, I felt like it's a hard game. I felt it was. By the way, Ninja Dog was like right F+. You finished the level, but he was really terrible. That's not good. Most games don't do that. In fact, what they do is they give you, they are in the community, the Affinity Spaces, plus the game, and the information the game is collecting, gives you, essentially you're being assessed on multiple variables about how you're growing towards mastery. That's why the game wants to say, we'll sort you with the other players that are at your level. It needs to know where are you in the stages to growth. Not, it doesn't say, well, you got a D now, so you should give up. Now, if you can do this with Halo. Halo collects tons of information about every click and what you're doing and what it means in the game. And if you allow your machine them to get the information, they take all the information from all the players around the world and they quantify them in multiple variables and make nice little graphs and will send back to you a bunch of information that says, here's where you stand in comparison to millions of other people on all these variables. Many real-time strategy games end with 24 graphs about how you did on many. You were doing great in taxation, so well in technology, this guy was ahead of you in this age. But Rise of Nations, if you've never played it, the last part, when you win or lose, you get so much information, it makes like, kind of a math class look dumb. And what is the information for? It is grading you, but it's actually used as how to say, what went wrong with my strategies? How will I get better at this the next time? And what good, when you give a kid, say you got a C+, does that help planning at all? When I tell you how you did on 14 variables against thousands of other players and different theories about how to play, are you going to be able to get ready for the next session? Yeah. And you're going to have massive meta-knowledge about the system, right? So they don't assess on what Bob Mislugby calls a drop out of the sky test. By the way, they don't give you courtesies A's. They don't dumb the grade down. All right, so that's a set of features that are going on all at once. Convergent media, different ways to learn. There's the game, there's the computer games, there is the Affinity Space, the social groups. Sometimes you teach, sometimes you learn. There's language just in time and on demand. So what we have here is what I would call a learning system. And that learning system has a lot of moving parts in it, right? If you think about it, this is not designing a piece of equipment. It's not designing a lesson. It's not designing a pedagogy. It's designing a system. See, and my argument is that modern teachers will be like game designers, designers of good, well-designed experiences for learning, where learning means a form of representation of language and content. And teaching is an act of designing, just as a game designer designs an experience that will teach you how to solve problems. That's what Yu-Gi-Oh! Is doing. It's teaching you how to use an arcane language and a game to solve problems. That's what teachers will do. That's why when somebody says, well, let's just teach through games, let's just teach through social media, let's teach Web 2.0. No, let's not. Let's teach with everything properly put into a functioning system like Yu-Gi-Oh! That wouldn't put you out of business if you want to market, right? So, now, the moral of this is not to go make Yu-Gi-Oh! It's to think about how can I use convergent media, low cost of failure, language just in time and on demand, which, different forms of teaching, different organizations, how am I going to put my system together? See, it's a creative act. But it's also, we do know a lot about what good systems look like. Now, one of the things say, this is what I'm going to close on. So I'm not talking, you don't need a game. You can have any, you do have to have some experience. By the way, there's a wonderful game that your kids should definitely play. It was made by either God or nature, and it's out there. But it still has to be mentored, because there's too much stuff out there. But the fact is, of course, use that. With augmented reality, that can be out there free of charge. See, we know what augmented reality is, where you have a little handheld that puts fictional stuff on the real landscape. Why? Why bother to make the real landscape? Somebody made it. Use it free. Right? All right. Now, but what would be the role of games? How does game-based learning work? Well, the reason games are interesting at all for learning is all a game is problem solving. Right? Any game has a set of problems that must be solved. And they get harder and harder. And if you don't solve them, you don't win. But also, if you can't solve them, or you're bored solving them, or you give up, the company goes broke. Now, the company, until relatively recently, the way gaming culture worked, you can't dumb it down. Gamers don't want simple games. They don't want short games. They want challenge. So you can't dumb it down to get your consumer. You have to actually teach them to play the game, which means teaching them to solve the problem. Now, by the way, games can be made with any problem. Right? So I'll just give you some examples. Here is the game, a Halo game, probably is Halo, that you save the world from aliens. That's a real problem, and probably one we'll face soon. Here's another one, Civilization. Here you have to take a civilization against other ones, played by other people, and take it from the earliest age to the nuclear age. And you have to solve all of their problems in technology, taxation, war, diplomacy, for every century, right, against other people. And then you get a bunch of information about how you did it. See, now, it's a weird world, because wouldn't it be good to at least have seen if George Bush could have won this once? Right? I mean, wouldn't you want your mayor or your senator to, maybe they could play a couple of rounds of Civilization to see if they could actually get us out of the Iron Age and not back into one of my all-time favorite games, any of you gamers know what this is, heartbreakingly wonderful game, Chibi Robo, Japanese, of course, because all the really crazy games are Japanese. And Chibi Robo, just to show you people, you can make it on any problem. The problem here is he is a 4-inch house cleaning robot. And he has to clean the whole house, being only 4 inches tall. Is to get to the top of the chest of drawers. He's got to clean the chandeliers. I will tell you, those are hard problems. And what I loved about this game, first of all, I have never seen what the world looks like to a 4-inch thing. It's just, we humans we're middling. We're not real big. We don't know what it looks like to the universe, and we don't know what it looks like to an atom. But I do know what it looks like to a 4-inch house cleaning robot. Now, the other thing the guy has to do, he's a very nice man too, this little guy with brutal, I don't know what his gender is. He might have a gender. He has to keep families happy. And he gets happy. And they're very dysfunctional. They're getting a divorce. The children are totally traumatized. So the daughter is in a frog suit and will only say ribbit. Even the pets are traumatized. And he has to solve all their social problems and get them happy. And finally, he notices at night there's some really weird things going on. Some of the toys, but not all of the toys, get animated. They move around. And he finds a robot, just like himself, but like 6 feet tall, in the basement, dead. No electricity. And he's got to figure out what's that robot doing in the basement, and he's got to find out why are the toys animal. Right? He's got a lot of tasks. And it's an incredibly fun game. But what's interesting to me when I'm around GDC, and there's a lot of games that I'm using. Well, what will make games hard is the day they make you cry. Well, when I finished this game and found out why the big robot was in the basement, I just cried like a baby. It's great. So the point is, don't tell me that you couldn't make a game about algebra if you can make one about a 4-inch house cleaning robot. But of course, somebody's already beat you to the algebra game. Most of the math games are pretty terrible. This one is superb. This is called Dragon Box, and it teaches algebra in a way that is so entertaining you can't stop playing it. And for the first time in your life, if you're like me and you never really got algebra at a level of why anybody would want to do it, you all of a sudden, so that's what it was about. And that's because this game marries the game mechanic with what algebra actually does so beautifully. It's made by some people in Copenhagen, I think. Somebody out there in one of those countries that still have economies. And you know, this is the game that I played just for pure fun. I picked it up, played it again and again. And what I love, now it's great preparation for learning for algebra because it gets clear to you what you're doing. And that it's a form of pattern recognition. That there are little rules that really spiffily work. And it starts, by the way, with representations that have no algebraic symbols in them. And then eventually you're actually solving equations that you just want to show your mother that you could do, right? Again, the point here is games are good because they're problem spaces. And they teach just the way Yu-Gi-Oh does. So all the features I just gave you for Yu-Gi-Oh, with these games and in commercial games, they don't just give you the piece of software. The way Yu-Gi-Oh doesn't just give you the cards, remember. It gives you the Convergent Media, it gives you the Affinity Spaces, it operates by well-designed principles like don't give language it out of context, give it just the time and on. It does all that stuff. So all good games, like take Zelda. Zelda's got 50 billion Affinity Spaces, right? There are Zelda modded movies, there are books, there's fan fiction. There are people trying to figure out the story of all the Zelda games, and the last guy who did got a Nobel Prize. It's a very complex story. People have modded it. And it's been around for years. It's a moving system, and you can't look just at the Zelda game. You have to look at the whole system, the mods, the affinity spaces, the brilliant principles that are built into the design of Zelda as a teacher. Let me give you one example. You'd never think of this. I heard that people who've made the Zelda games over the years give a talk at GDC. The whole talk, some of you played Zelda? You know when you solve a problem, you get that little ding? The whole talk was about all the research they did to figure out the timing of the ding. And what they said, look, if it comes too early, it takes away your pride that you solved the problem. If it comes too late, it doesn't feel like a reward. They went through at a micro level to say exactly, well, this ding will be a reward, but not take away your sense of achievement. If you care about design at that level, imagine what are they doing? They are experimenting with thinking about feedback in a way that is profoundly deep about people's emotions, their sense of capacity, their sense of achievement. That's the tiniest part of the game. Now, they've made billions of dollars, so they have plenty of time. But not only is the software not alone, but the software itself is a well-designed experience. It has been designed with all those principles I said. There is a teacher there, it's the game designer. They are managing you see in Zelda, you always know where to go. The world is built in such a way that it helps you know, pay attention to this, pay attention. So you get my point. We always want to say, well, what's important is the technology, it's the software, it's the computer, it's the iPad. No, it isn't. It's those technologies in a learning system that has moving parts. Otherwise, those technologies are useless. All right, now, when I did Prairie and I told you wanted to know what is the connection between learning and language, and I said, well, it's because reading the world, which is having experiences, and therefore the foundation of learning, is equivalent to reading the word. You can't read the world if you haven't read the world. If you have no word, you have nothing but world. I kind of lied, because Freire actually went on to say this. In a way, however, we can go further and say that reading the word is not preceded merely by reading the world, but by a certain form of writing it or rewriting it. That is, it's transforming it by means of conscious, practical work. So what he's really saying is writing the world and reading and doing so. Let me get my little thing. Writing the world and writing the word are equally important as reading the world and reading the word, and maybe more important because maybe it's the capacity to rewrite the world that is the deep driving force behind both language and learning. And again, he said this is a political statement, but it's simply become empirical now in the midst of the maker movement of pro-ams that are beating professional credentialed people in affinity spaces. What is the maker movement, but demanding that with any tool we get, we write the world and not just read it. Thank you.